We good? All right. So this is another rhetorical device that we have here. This rhetorical device is called eponym. Eponym. Okay. This is slide number 1. No, the last one was technically it's slide number 1, but I just start the count from when we first get into it. So this is slide number 1. So, an eponym, what does it do? It makes a connection between a famous person's particular attributes and someone else. So, in this manner, an eponym is similar to an allusion, but an eponym emphasizes an attribute rather than the entire person or event or place as an allusion does. So, an eponym focuses on the person and an attribute of that person, and you're using that attribute to then describe someone else who you are writing about. It's kind of like an allusion, yes, but it's specifically for a person, whereas an allusion can be a person, a place, or an event, right?
So would an eponym be allusion?
It's like an allusion because an eponym focuses on an attribute of the person that you are alluding to.
Could an allusion do the same thing?
Yes, but then it would turn into an eponym. I'll give you some examples. Maybe that will help to clarify it as we move on. Okay.
I'm not ready.
So, slide number 2. What ways we might use eponym if we want to give a stylistic touch to our writing. We could use it as a stylistic ending to something that we are writing. We make use an eponym to make your essay seem a little better. Okay. You could also use it to spice up a bland description. If you find that you're writing about a person and you're like, this person's really boring, make an eponym to another really boring person. It'll make your essay sound better. There you go. Do that if you want to. You might use it to describe or clarify an aspect of someone's personality. It's another way we might use eponym. And we'll get into some tips for using it, which are tips are actually very similar to the tips for when you're using allusion. And we'll get to that in slide number 3. What's that? You needed some? All right. So here's some tips for using it. Like allusion, you want to make sure that the readers will understand the character you are using. So try not to use some obscure person who no one knows, or only a certain group of people will know. And I'll give you some examples of those in the next few slides here. You also may need to elaborate if there's more than one quality associated with the eponym that you're using. So if the person that you're using has a bunch of different qualities, you might want to elaborate and explain which quality you are making the you are comparing your person who you're talking about to. So which quality of that famous person you want to draw out of, and you want the readers to understand about your eponym. Yes. Obscure means someone who is not well known. That's how it's being used here. You could put that in your personal dictionary if you'd like to. Your personal dictionary doesn't have to come from just the books that we're reading. And a final tip. It can be a cliche if it is used too often. So if you're using an eponym that has been used over and over again, and it has been used so much that it has become a cliche, you maybe don't necessarily want to use that particular eponym in your writing. All right, slide number 4. Here are some examples of something that might be obscure and something that might not be. Agnieszka would have been proud of the patient's recovery. Exactly, right? If you were in the field of, say, Hindu medicine, you would know exactly who Agnieszka is. But if you were not, you have no idea, right? So, keep that in mind when you're writing. Obscure references. Here's another one. He could act like a real Alex when he wanted to. I know exactly what, right? Well, if you were, for example, were in college with me and the English majors that I hung out with, there was a writer named Alexander Dumas, spelled D-U-M-A-S. And so we might reference someone and say that they were being a Dumas. Or a... I don't know, but it's not spelled the same way, but we made that in reference to saying someone was not very smart. Right? Okay. So then we shorten that to saying you're being an Alex right now, Alexander Dumas, right? You're being someone who's not very smart right now. Okay, yeah. Okay. So those are some obscure references that if you didn't understand it, you would have no idea what the person was trying to say, right? So, here's one that's a little bit more well known. He was the Einstein of the mediocre. That means he was a genius at being average. Right?
That's like a big...
He was... It is a very... right? But it makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is what they're... And everybody knows Einstein is synonymous with brains and being smart and genius, right? Or here's another one. When it comes to making the company money, she's a regular Midas.
What's Midas?
So some people maybe don't know that. King Midas, everything he touched turned into gold. So he eventually turned his kids into gold too, because he was the whole legend. So basically, this woman is very good at making the company money, right? And Midas is one of those ones that's a bit more well known than, say, Agnieszka. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. All right, and we'll move on to some examples of having to elaborate on an eponym. Slide number 5. When we played Clue, he was a regular Sherlock Holmes. He won every game. Okay? So if we just left off that little bit on the end there, if I can do that for you, he won every game, you just say when we played Clue, he was a regular Sherlock Holmes. Does that mean that, what does that mean, right? Sherlock Holmes, was he very smart?
Sherlock Holmes is known for his deductive reasoning.
Yes, he is. Was he a good deductive reasoner? Well, no, we're explaining he was a regular Sherlock Holmes because he won every game, right?
I get it.
And you also sort of have that allusion there to Sherlock, one of Sherlock Holmes' sayings where he would say the game is afoot, right? The game has started, so he won every game. Do you see that connection there?
Yes.
Sherlock Holmes, game is afoot. He won every game of Clue. Okay. We also have another one here. And now that you all know this reference, we can elaborate on it. The senator, with the patience of Job, endured setback after setback until his time finally came. Okay? So the senator had lots of setbacks, but he didn't give up, and he kept persevering, and finally he got his reward, right? And the next one that we have, the way he talked, you'd think he was Atlas holding up the heavens. So rather than saying you'd think he was Atlas holding up the heavens, we don't understand, okay, he's got a lot of heavy burdens, right? But it's the way he talked, the way he said everything was so difficult for him, you'd think that he was like Atlas holding up the heavens. So you need a little bit of elaboration there to help your eponym make more sense. And our final one for examples of elaborating, her shortness rivaled Napoleon. Okay, as opposed to, you might say, she rivaled Napoleon, right? Well, what does that mean? Does that mean she was very good at commanding armies? We don't know, right? So we have to add in some elaboration about what aspect we are comparing to.
Was Napoleon really short?
Yes.
I heard that he was like 5'5". That's not short. Or guy that is.
I don't know exactly how tall he was,
Well, let's compare 5'5" to Don there.
or short.
No, his wife was taller than him.
But typically, someone who has a Napoleon complex is very short, but they're very outspoken, and they want everybody to hear them. So often they try to compensate for their stature by being loud, by being very commanding. And it is. So we maybe Napoleon started that stereotype of short people, right? I don't know.
Explain him.
But not every short person is like that. So, all right, slide number 6. Here's some examples of something being a cliche that's been used too many times. My sister went out with the real Scrooge last night. We could even elaborate that and say he didn't pay for anything, right? Scrooge, you guys understand that reference?
Are you not?
Christmas Carol?
American?
So, let me explain that. So, the story is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And in it, a man named Scrooge is very miserly with his money. He keeps all his money to himself. He doesn't like to spend money or give money away to anybody. And so, The Ghost of Christmas Past, The Ghost of Christmas Present. Yes, that one. Okay. And so his name is Scrooge. And so the name and the term Scrooge has become synonymous with someone who's really tight with their money and doesn't like to spend it or give it away. Stingy, yeah. Or another one, he gave it a Herculean effort but still managed to fail. We've got to start thinking of somebody other than Hercules to make a reference to being strong to. Okay. Although typically referencing Greek gods and goddesses probably will never get to be cliche. But everybody always uses Hercules as being really strong. So. He had the strength of Thor wielding his hammer, you might say, right? Couldn't. Or from you guys remember Harrison Bergeron?
Yeah.
Where there's one statement I'm pretty sure it says he would have awed Thor, the god of thunder, when talking about Harrison Bergeron. Anyway, moving on. Here are some exercises that we're going to do, and we'll go ahead and shut off the camera for now, if it'll work. Yes.